I guess I'll do another one of these book things. I'm in a troubled period in my life, let's just put it that way, more than usual. I don't want to go into details, but this is a way of trying to distract myself. I just finished this one, An Instance of the Fingerpost. This was written a little before the turn of the century, and this last century. And it's kind of a weird book. It's certainly a murder mystery, sort of, kind of. There is a murder in it, and you don't know who's responsible till you get towards the end of the book. It's presented as a series of untrustworthy narrators, but they're not lying. They're giving you everything they know or believe, but what they know and believe is not always true. is I guess the best way of putting it. But you're not being given. So I'm thinking of I don't know. So part of it reminded me of the Floating Admiral book, which I covered a while back, which had a number of murder mystery authors trying to write a whodunit, each one passing the manuscript to the next, and each one, having their own take on what the story would be. And it kind of reminds me of that, in that you're getting, I guess, as truthful an account from each of the people. Anyway, each of the narrators essentially writes their own discussion of the events that occurred. And one of the events that occurs is this murder. And it's not clear who committed the murder. Different people have different impressions as to who it was. But there's a lot more going on within it. It covers affairs of state in the time of the Stuart Restoration, the early years of the Stuart Restoration, as far as I can tell. When I started reading it, my first impression was it felt like there was an attempt to, write in a manner that was trying to sound older than this book actually is. And it didn't strike me as, in the fashion of like 17th century writing of letters and whatnot. It felt more a little bit like 1950s writing in a lot of ways. And not necessarily so I remember writing from the 1940s, 50s, whatever, being pretty accessible in like the science fiction realm and whatnot. Whereas I'm thinking more, I can't even remember. I read something recently that felt kind of, that was from that period. But the guy who wrote I, Claudius, and I don't remember what it was. It was about this island of misfortunes or something, a historical novel set in set in Spanish colonial endeavors. Anyway, it felt a little bit like that as I first started reading, but I no longer, as I continued on, it very quickly, I don't know if the writing changed. I don't know if he particularly, to some extent, he puts on um, different tones, etc., by the different authors or by the different narrators in the story. They're each right. The framing is this is a series of manuscripts that presents this story, and at least one of them is actually purely is designed to befuddle, um, as explained at the end. But it really kind of drew me into the story in different ways, and even unlikable. There are a couple of unlikable narrators who you kind of see their point of view, and you're kind of rooting for them in a way. Even if you're like, oh my God, this is a horrible person. I found it actually pretty damn enjoyable. This is one of those books that, because it's not really a whodunit, but it's one that relies upon not knowing what's going to happen and what happened within it, to the extent that, like, I fear that a second reading or whatever would kind of lose a lot of the enjoyment and a lot of of being sucked into the story. Because everything by that point. You'll be reminded, even if you pick it up 10 years later, you'll be reminded of the things that that are going on in it. There are very few stories that when I reread them, I don't know sort of the main flow of them. There's one. The Bird is Cruel. It's a short story, and I don't know, like, how mundane it is actually what prevents me, I think, from ever remembering what happens. But in this one, I'm pretty damn sure if I reread it, I'm going to lose a lot of that experience of trying to puzzle out what's going on, just like you would in a whodunit or whatever. But in a lot of ways, the murder itself, or the death, well, one of the deaths, that results in a trial and whatnot, is finding out who did it is not all that important. Finding out why they did it kind of doesn't feel that important, but it feels like it might be important at certain points of the story. The story goes well beyond this murder, and very much, again, into affairs of state, etc. What's kind of interesting about it, I found the writing enjoyable once I dug in a little bit. What's kind of interesting is that it's just replete with important people from the history of the time. And, you've got Boyle. I'm just going to name a few of them. It touches on King Charles II, but and Clarendon and people like that, who are not major in the story. Robert Grove, who I don't really recognize. John Locke is in it. Richard Lower, who attempted transfusions early on. Let me see. Got a couple of fictional characters in it. John Wallace, the sort of a father of cryptography in a way. Some people I didn't know about who are important, like John Thurlow, who was apparently a spy master for Cromwell. Anthony Wood handles this. Christopher Wren is in it. There, and, you know, it's dealing with Oxford as sort of the center of the story within this early Stuart Restoration period. And you've got issues of the religious problems, of you know, pro-royalists who you know, were part of a conspiracy and all kind of neat shit. And there's a lot of little twists and turns because, again, nobody has the full story until you hit the end of the book. The final author does more or less know everything, but only because he has all the other papers to combine. But it's kind of interesting in one sense because in the I think the second author has the works of the first author and is refuting different points within them, and like why certain things are lied about in one of the stories is finally revealed, and why, you know, just all kinds of stuff along those lines, where, so, you know, at least one of the authors is intentionally trying to deceive with what he writes, but that deception doesn't really catch much into, say, the murder or many of the other aspects of it. You really have to piece everything together, and it all kind of comes together at the end. The final section has, well, not just the final section. There's little bits of sort of Christian mysticism worked into this, and how much to believe, how much not. The book doesn't really take a strong stance on that, you know. So one of the authors does, but that's a different matter. Yeah, so I'm left with kind of the wondering of, do I keep this because it was an enjoyable read? I really kind of don't want to give it away, the book. I don't want to give it up. But on the other hand, am I gonna get anywhere near the enjoyment out of it that I would like to out of reading again? I do recommend it. If you see it in a little free library or something, pick it up. I found it very, very pleasant to read, in part because of the historical figures in it, and knowing how many were historical as you run across them. You know, people like Boyle, you know who they are, and you get to meet them, and you know, the main character, the narrator at one point or another, is interacting with them. Maybe all of the narrators do. One of them may not. But you get these slices into, you know, how at least the author, from research and whatever, thinks that they would have interacted, whatever, to get the reputation that they did. And the different narrators have different impressions of these different historical figures. One of the things, so there were a couple of characters who are fictional in it, and because of how many are not fictional, and it is covered at the end, there's sort of an afterword, or not an afterword, but an appendix or whatever, dramatis personas, that goes into who all the people were in history, and then who the fictional characters, and there are a couple of major characters in it that are fictional, were based on. And that's, you know, it's kind of intriguing to see that they were still kind of based on someone. You just didn't want to tag this, I don't know, not really a probum, but actions that, you know, are not historical, are not historically known things. So they're just, you know, completely fictitious things. But it's still rooted in the concept of us of characters that were real to some extent. So I found myself at one point or another starting to look up people because I'm like, wait, does this person exist? Because some of them are people I didn't know who, yeah, are real historical figures, and then again there are some that are not, which is kind of intriguing. I also had to look up what the fuck a fingerpost is. Turns out it's one of them signs that has, little arrows pointing in different directions and whatnot. Who'd have known? Anyway, yeah, I enjoyed this one, and, I read slowly now, but I could definitely see eating this one up if I wasn't, trying to dose myself with electronic heroin. All right, up it goes, I guess. Oop.